I believe that some kind of connection was made, because then I've got memories throughout childhood of this strange visitation of small, almost fetal-like beings in sort of skeletal structure, if you can call it skeletal. They were grey, almost transparent.
Welcome. I'm here with Paul Sinclair. Paul, welcome.
Thank you very much, Sean, and it's great to be here. And I'm looking forward to sharing some of my research and views with you and your listeners.
It's an absolute pleasure, Paul. Okay, so how did you get into this crazy study of just the broader phenomena? Like, what brought you here? What got you started?
I think for myself, it's always been there, or as long as I can remember. I know as a little child, you're not going to keep a diary of events that you perceive as have happened in your life, but definitely always been there for me, even throughout my married life before I got heavily involved in the research. And that's because of the things that happened to me in childhood, not imaginary things that have stayed with me. I'm 62 years old. And the events, and we'll call them events because there's little cameos of events that I remember. I've not got a sequence that starts from the beginning, middle, and an end. I've just got cameos of events that stayed with me from childhood. And hence I ended up writing a book called The Night People about these visitations. It wasn't a nice experience. I know there are people out there who claim to have had interaction. We'll call them aliens. I still don't know what they were. You know, so I'm reluctant to say that these things are from outer space. It's clear that they're already here. So that they're existing and visiting from some other sphere of existence, should we say. But where, I don't know. I mean, looking up at the vast amount of universe that there is up there, there's bound to be some life up there. But whatever were interacting with me and interacting with other people is clearly here, or has some means by use of some exotic science to get here. And as a child, I saw these beings. And I don't say that lightly. It's took a long time to start to feel comfortable in my own skin to talk about it. But, you know, I got married when I was 20 and never said a word about this to my wife. It took years to start talking about the things that had happened. And it's so strange that everything seems to have a time and a place. So, like I've said, you don't have a diary of these things, but I think it had been 4 or 5 years old. And I also remember my dad, we lived in for those in the UK, you'll be familiar with this, but it was a council house, a semi-detached house in a little village called Old Dennerby. And pretty strict, ex-Air Force, Royal Air Force, my dad. And I went to bed and I didn't bother getting up. You know, you didn't get up. If he told you to go to bed, that was it. You didn't get up. He was really strict, to be honest with you. And he wakes me up in the night. It could have been 9 o'clock at night. It could have been 7. It could have been early hours. I don't know. And there's some in the distance, because the back bedroom looked onto pasture, and there'd be the town of Mexborough in the distance, and all you could see were these rows of streetlights. To a little boy, it looked like it were miles away, but it was probably just a mile away. And to the right of me, there's a power station called Mexborough Power Station, big cooling towers. And he's woke me up because he's probably gone out into the garden, I'm assuming, to have a cigarette.
Real quick, you said cooling towers. Is that nuclear power plant?
Yeah, big cooling towers to the power station, yeah.
But specifically a nuclear power plant?
No, not nuclear. No, just electricity.
Okay.
Electricity. Okay. Yeah, but good point, because I'd never thought that some people will be asking that question. And so there's these 2 huge cooling towers, and he'd woke me up because he'd seen this object, and it looked a lemon white colour. I think the cooling towers were about 140 foot in height, and it's midpoint, and it's off the towers, and it looks like a swirling ball of energy. And it just wakes me up and shows me it. And we've got some binoculars and we're looking at it. And then at some point he leaves me. There's nothing mystical there. He leaves me and goes downstairs. But the only unusual thing is he doesn't say go back to bed. He leaves me watching this. And it slowly travels along the rooftops of Mexborough, you know, looking at it from a mile away, and disappears into the distance of Swinton.
When the United States and China clash, the world will never be the same, especially when forces beyond reality threaten to intervene. What if the United States went to war with the People's Republic of China? How would these rivals fight for supremacy on land, sea, air, and across the stochastic streams of time? What wonder weapons would be unleashed? What horrors would emerge from the irradiated sludge of the South China Sea? What heroes would rise and forever change the course of history? Tread into the deepest and darkest dimensions of the multiverse, gaze through a kaleidoscope of fractured realities, and bear witness to the disturbing visions of World War III from today's greatest minds in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Weird World War, China. Available now from Bain Books at bain.com.
I know I'm saying places here, Sean, that your listeners won't be familiar with, but you can Google these places. They all exist. And I believe I don't know, I've wrote about things in the Truth Proof books about what I call the intermind connection, where you look at these things, like, just briefly step away from this for a moment. The fisherman on the cliff tops, one prime example of what I call the intermind connection. He'd gone up there to do some fishing off the cliff tops of Bempton, and he's looking out to sea, and he sees a star or a bright light that he's not familiar with, and he fixes on it. And within an instant, this fisherman tells me it's over his head. Can't have been a star. It wasn't in the heavens, but he'd made some kind of connection. And I believe after seeing that object, we call it a UFO, whatever you want to term it as, I believe that some kind of connection was made, because then I've got memories throughout childhood of this strange visitation of small, almost fetal-like beings in sort of skeletal structure, if you can call it skeletal. They were grey, almost transparent. There was one occasion, probably the first occasion. Do you want me to continue with this, Sean?
Yeah, absolutely.
There was one occasion, the same bedroom, and because I go into a lot of detail and I don't want to bore your listeners, but back in the day, and I'm 62 years old, as we've just said, back in the day, fiberglass curtains, believe it or not, were quite, not fashionable, but they were cheap and they were cheerful. Who'd put them in the bedroom now? So my mum had got these silver grey fiberglass curtains in my room. And I remember waking up and I'm looking at the curtains. And another thing, I shouldn't have been able to see because the room's dark. And I can see eyes in the curtains. And I'm looking at these eyes. And they remind me of cow's eyes. Why? Because we can only relate to our own experiences. And at the back of our home, there was pasture, and there was Frisian cows in the pasture. And they'd come to the fence when my dad had cut the lawn, and you could see the big sort of lifeless eyes, these big black eyes. And I'm thinking, they're cow's eyes. Those are big eyes. And then they were the same colour, almost like chameleon-like. They came out of the curtains. They were always there, but that's what happened. And they're around my bed. The next memories I've got are crying. And I don't know why, but I'm crying. And then I've got no more memories of that event. That's what I said, little cameos of events. And those things happened not every night, not every week, maybe not every month. Because, they're in the books, but those things happened throughout childhood, up until about the age of 14. And then for some reason, I don't mean it stopped, but it kind of dissipated. So we'd got all these events, and talking about animals, New Year's Eve, 1970. And it's the craziest, I think it's one of the craziest stories that you're ever going to hear. And when I spoke to Whitley Strieber, it was the one that stuck in his mind. And my mum and dad were members of a sports club, the Dale Brown Sports Club. And at Christmas times, they'd hold big Christmas parties for the adults and Christmas parties for the children. And we went New Year's Eve. Thick with snow. We walked about 3 miles. Dad wouldn't drink and drive. And we're coming back from Dale and Brown Sports Club. Been a great night. So we've gone into 1971. So we've gone 1970, 1971. So we cross over the Canal Bridge, we cross over the River Don Bridge, all places that people might be interested in Googling. If you're sad like me, I'd be listening to a podcast and I'd be Googling these things, thinking, hey, is he on the level? So then we get to the railway bridge and we look down at the pasture that goes up to our home, and I can see the row of council houses. And as we're walking down, and it's just a single track road with a pond shaped like a horseshoe to the right and this pasture to the left. And I see something I can't believe. And I see 2 rabbits and a guinea pig in the side of the grass in the snow, alive. And I was always a very outdoor kind of guy, little boy. I would catch grass snakes, newts, frogs, lizards, birds' eggs. I'd get, which you can't do now. And promoting the idea of doing it, but I were always into everything, and I knew I wanted these. I'd got a rabbit at home in a cage. I wanted them. So I'm walking, and they're there, but they don't move. And my mum says, "Oh, my God, Bob," my dad was called Robert, "can you see him?" He goes, "Yeah, I can. Keep hold of him." And I'm pulled away, and they pulled me back. And I have another little go, "Well, you didn't do things twice with me, Dad, because he were a man that would smack first and ask questions afterwards. That's just the nature of him." And he sounded frightened. He said, just keep walking, ignore him, just keep walking. And I can't understand this. And then I realised as well that their voices had changed. And it was as though they were talking to each other through a railway tunnel. It was weird. Everything had changed, the noise, and we were near to the River Don, and I couldn't hear the River Don. Now, I'm a little boy, and people will be thinking, has he processed all that? How does he know all that? I do. And that's what had happened. The voices had changed. Anyway, we're going up the lane. Mum's got hold of my hand, and she's saying I'm frightened. And I make one more round, not to get them, to turn round. And in the field, stood back from these animals that had never moved, and there were 2 rabbits and a guinea pig, which is crazy. There's 2 beings exactly like I'd seen, only taller, stood in the snow, stood in the field.
To advertise on Through a Glass Darkly, email throughaglassdarkly@gmail.com.
And I don't think you can get a story quite as crazy sounding as that, but that's what happened. We got home. My dad told me to go to bed. Well, I went to bed. Well, that story, you'd think it was almost over. And then I think it was a few days later, there's a lady who lived next door but one. She came round. She's talking to my mum and dad. And I'm listening to them. And incredibly, this lady's over 100 years old. She's still alive. I've not got to speak to her yet. That's one thing I want to do, to see if she still remembers. I'll not say her surname, because people would know. And her first name was Ethel. And she had a son. And she was telling my mum and dad that her son came home, and as he's on New Year's Eve, and as he's walking over the bridges, he saw something very unusual that frightened him. I've not got to the bottom of what it was, but it's got to have been the same thing. So there's another cameo of a strange kind of event from childhood. And I'm not asking, there's a saying, and we all know it, seeing is believing. And I'm not asking people to believe me. I'm telling these things to people as I remember them. And if you've not seen something like that, I don't expect somebody to believe it. And I'll give an analogy for that. Sorry, Sean, you're going to say?
Yeah. What did your father do for the Royal Air Force? What was his he was a glider pilot. I'd like to say, he flew fast jets, but he didn't. He was a glider pilot. In World War II?
No, just it was after World War II. So
they still had glider pilots after World War II?
Oh, yeah. I can even remember the glider he used to fly. It was called a Kranisch, which had been a German glider, believe it or not. So, yeah, that's the one he favoured the most, because he did talk about things like that,
Sorry, I'm just trying to... The reason I'm asking is there's people who sometimes have these interactions. There's often an Air Force or RAF connection in some way. There's often a nuclear connection. Mm. But what kind of missions did he do with gliders? Like
I don't know, Sean. I'd be stretching it if I tried to say what he did. I don't know. He was always very quiet about it. I'll tell you what he did do, though, and this is pretty close. This is pretty close to the knuckle. He passed in 2006. And he was in the hospital for months and months before, and I used to go and visit after work every night. And sometimes I'd only spend 10 minutes. I've got 4 girls, and we'd have to get home, but I'd always go. And he was in not a private room, but a side ward. He was National Health. And when I got there, a few days before he passed, I got to the hospital, and my mum's waiting outside. She says, he wants to talk to you. I says, what do you mean he wants to talk to me? Because he was on oxygen. He had a condition called bronchial ectasis, which basically just made him so his lungs just packed up, and he was struggled to breathe. And she said, no, he wants to talk to you, won't tell me. So I went in, And he took his oxygen mask off, and it didn't take ages, but eventually he told me, he says, the aliens came to visit him last night. I says, you what? And he's not got a lot of interest in the subject of unexplained phenomena, my dad. Apart from showing me that in childhood, he'd not got an avid interest. He'd not got some kind of weird and mystical stories to tell me. And he told me, and I said, well, what did they say? And he couldn't remember. Could have been medication he were on. It could have been because he's low in oxygen that he's hallucinating. I don't know. But that was interesting, for me anyway, as someone interested in this subject. And yeah, just jumped forward, haven't we, to 2006. But these things happened in childhood. There's many, many instances, and I don't, like we've said, I don't mean every night, every month. But then if we jump forward then from the age of 14, then I moved into the property where I live now in 1993. And it's almost as though things are fixed and ready to roll. It's almost like your life's mapped out because it started again. And I don't mean the first night, but almost instantly it started. We moved up here, me, my wife Mary, and our 4 girls, and it started again. It started for the girls, it started for Mary, which it hadn't done before, and the phenomena to the point where in night people, I've got such good neighbours, and some of them still live here, remember seeing the electrical discharges in the light, the house at night, where it looked like there's a welder's light flashing inside the house. Not just in one room, in many rooms. There's a guy who lived over the road and he damaged his lungs working in a foundry. I hope I'm not rambling here, guys, and jumping all over the place. And Peter, they call him, and he couldn't sleep laying down because it just didn't work for him. And he sat in a nice, comfortable chair, and sometimes it still smoked. And even with damaged lungs, he said he sat in his front room. He came and knocked on our door. And this will time with something else in a moment. He knocked on our door, let's say 8 o'clock in the morning, and said, is everything okay? And I said, why? He said, because there was big flashes of light in your house the other night. And he'd knocked on our door another time because he'd took his wife. He'd gone upstairs to wake his wife because he said he could see spheres of light in the top bedroom. It's a huge Victorian house, this great big winding staircase that goes up over 3 floors, and he said he could see lights in the bedroom, red lights. I've jumped ahead of myself. I should have started with this one. I said these lights dropped and then they were in the other room, and then they dropped and then they were in the ground floor. So Peter had seen these things. Pat's still alive. Pat remembers seeing them. She only lives literally 75 yards from me, not even that, where I'm sat now. And so lots of the neighbours, there's new neighbours who live across, they've seen weird things. I've now converted this property into 3 flats. The guy in the top flat's having strange experiences. And when the tenants come in, Sean, don't say a word about the unexplained to them. The last thing I want to do. But they'll come to me and they've spoke about things, let's put it that way. But I'm jumping about all over the place. It started almost instantly. I used to come up to the property with our eldest daughter because it wasn't habitable when we first got it. The occupants had passed away, left everything in it, and we bought it kind of lock, stock and barrel. And my trade as a joiner, I was just working on it and trying to get it sort of fit to live in. And me and Sarah used to come up, and Sarah had helped me. She'd be about 12 years old, 11, 12 years old. And we were sleeping on a mattress at the top of the house. And this is so you can see we hadn't even moved in. And noises, we'd already started to hear noises in the house, and doors banging and voices, which I'd not associated with anything from childhood because that had stopped at around the age of 14. And then one night I'm laid on this mattress at the top of the house, and I'm sort of facing the doorway, and I can see this beautiful mahogany staircase and the spindles and the landing. I think it's important to paint a picture of what you're looking out onto. The landing was about 3.5 meters wide by 5 meters, just for the staircase that went all the way up. You could look down to the bottom. And I'm looking out onto this staircase, just at ground level on a mattress. And I thought, we've painted spindles white, the mahogany. And then, we haven't. And I'm kind of confused. I look at Sarah, she's fast asleep. And then the spindles got whiter and whiter until they looked like fluorescent tubes. Seriously looked like fluorescent tubes. And the next thing I see is, this is it's crazy, isn't it? That beings rising up and they're there, and then everything just went white, and it's daylight. As far as I'm concerned, I'm waking up. I've no memory of it, none at all. And it's Sunday. I know it must have been Sunday because when I wake up and I said to Sarah, look, we'll work till about dinner time, Sarah. Then we'll go home to your mum and your sisters. So I stretch my arms and I've got holes in both arms. Lots of little holes, as peppered. And there's all the pictures in Night People of the holes in my back and things, and the medical records, not just people talking about having medical records and never showing them. That in fact, they're actually doing a white paper on my abductions and presenting it to a medical board, a group of doctors. But anyway, that's another story.
Really quickly, what do the beings look like?
These beings did not look like the beings in childhood. It looked like it wasn't a nativity scene. I didn't see Jesus. I'm not trying to say that, but it almost looked angelic. You know, when you open a book up as a child and you see the rich colours, the golds and the silvers, there was an aura to what I was looking at, but I only saw it coming up and then everything went white and that was it.
So like light beings would be the...
essentially, probably, yeah. It's difficult. I've not really thought about what they were, if I'm being truthful, even after writing the book, but I have described them, and they're not like what I saw in childhood. Whatever I saw in childhood was terrifying, and it was absolutely terrifying, so much so that, you know, there's people going to, proof for some people, they require a lot more proof than what I'm giving. And all you're getting is anecdotal evidence or anecdotal accounts of what I say I've seen and experienced. And it's not enough for some people. It's too much for others. You know, I'm not professing that I've had some message from another civilization or some other intelligence. I'm just giving it out as it's happened to me. But yeah, they were angelic type beings. And jumping back then, Sean, to Peter over the road, when he talked about the flashes of light, that particular night, me and my wife, our girls were older, and it was 1997, and I think it was August, and I'd woken up in the night. We were at the back of the house, sleeping at the back of the house on middle floor, and there's lights in the room, and I can't move. Mary's asleep. And I don't mean I've turned, I can't move, but Mary's no memory of any of this. And in between the lights, I got the sight of these things from childhood. And then I can't see them, and then I can. Then they're around me on the bed, stood either side of me, which is impossible because I'm in a double bed and my wife's not there. So what's happening there, I don't know, because I still felt like I were in the room. And I'm kind of rushing through this, Sean, because I didn't know which direction we would be going. And it will make sense in a moment. So the next morning, I've no memory of this. None at all. And sun's streaming through the window. I get up, sit on the edge of the bed. There's a knock at the door, first of all, earlier. And I'm a real early riser. I always have been. 5 o'clock, 5:30, I'm up. I was tired. I didn't get up. It must have been 7, 8 o'clock. And somebody's knocking at the door downstairs. And I ignore it. The girls are up, 4 girls, and one of them will have gone to the door. It was Peter. And so it relates to what we were talking about. I said I was ahead of myself. And he was talking, he wanted to speak to me, but I spoke to him afterwards. But we'll get to that in a moment. And so I knew that was Peter, and I could hear the girls talking to him downstairs, or one of them. I think it'd been Jessica, because she would have wanted to be first at everything. So I'm sat on edge at bed. Mary must have rolled over because I've no clothes on. I'm just sat there. The door's shut. Everything's, it's standard, innit? You're in your bedroom. So she goes, "Oh, Paul, I don't believe it. You've got 3 holes in your back." Because I'd not remembered until that moment. "I don't believe it. You've got 3 holes in your back." And suddenly I remembered. Suddenly I remembered the pain of something turning in my back. And seriously, it felt like something. And obviously I had to go to the hospital then and have them looked at. And this is part of what the doctors are doing now, because I think I said I could have, when these wounds had been looked at, which they thought were cauterized and been done with some implement, they were saying to me, "Somebody must have done this to you. You can tell us. You need to tell us, because you couldn't have had this procedure done on you." The words were like, "It extends deep into the dermis." And, and they did. Oh, good God. I can't remember medical terminology, but it's all in there. if you could bear with me a moment, I might even be able to find the picture. But I don't mind sending you the picture.
Yeah, just send me the picture and I can flash it during the interview.
Yeah. So shall we do that in a moment? And so I've got 3 holes in my back, deep holes. Well, 2 were deep, and my wife's luckily she got out of bed, put a dressing gown on, and got one of those cameras that just takes a picture. You know, the Instamatic camera.
Instant camera, yeah. They don't exist They probably don't exist anymore.
So she took the picture, and we've got the picture, and it's in Night People. And does it prove that there was some kind of alien visitation on Paul Sinclair? Of course it doesn't. You've only got my word for it. But I have absolutely nothing in the world to gain by telling these stories. When I wrote that book and when I was ready to publish it, Whitley Strieber said to me, "Are you sure you want to do this? Because when you've sort of took the lid off it and you've started talking about it, there's no going back." And it was good advice from Whitley, but I've gone with Night People anyway.
Any history about the area where all these events happened? Like any strange history, paranormal history, things like that? Ley lines, like,
Well, where I do all the research, and obviously the guys at Skinwalker know about where I'm working and what I'm involved in, and they're really interested. We're on what's called the Bempton Fault. And it's got a rich history of unexplained phenomena. We're in a negative magnetic anomaly at Bempton, not a positive.
Yep, I've heard this before. By the way, before earthquake, I just did a deep dive using AI, so who knows? But I did a deep dive on sentient plasmoids. And what happens in places where there's fault lines before an earthquake, right? There are typically sightings of just plasma, right? It could be sentient or otherwise. But anyway, I just wanted to mention that because this is a synchronicity. I literally talked about this last week on my radio show.
Well, you're absolutely spot on when you say sentient plasmoids. My 2002, I had my first website, which I don't have now. I'll tell you the address of the new one, but the old one was called ILF UFO. ILF was not by mistake intelligent light forms, because that's what I coined it, the intelligent light forms, because that's primarily what we're seeing and what we're experiencing out there in these areas. Spheres of light that seem to, and I know we've jumped away from the abduction scenario, but spheres of light that seem to have some kind of intelligence, some kind of awareness, some kind of knowledge when the camera's being pointed at them that they switch off, because they're not flying from anywhere, Sean. These things just appear. You'll see one and it'll punch into a multiple of 3, 4, 5, with bright orange lights or red lights, and then they just disappear and they'll appear in a different part of the sky. We've got lots of footage of these. I'll tell you who's looked at the footage and spent some time. Is it that I want to get the names wrong? The guys with the RV that's kitted out, Tedesco, is it? And
well, the Tedesco brothers, yeah.
We've had them on our live stream, and they've looked at what there's a lot of similarities with what they've filmed and what we've filmed up there. There's strong similarities. So where were we then? Because that's just thrown me with the lights. Oh, yeah, right. You were asking about locations and if there's anything strange about the location, because I've always said location is key. And I believe location is key to a lot of the events. Location and person. You might get a combination of things and it can bring the phenomena through. Well, it turns out that the property, this big old property that we purchased, that were bought with all its contents, when we started stripping the wallpaper back, there's symbolism on the wall. There's pentagrams on the wall upstairs, which we've got all pictures of. When you lifted a floorboard, because the wiring got checked and the wiring got done, there's pages of the Bible under the floorboards. There's St. Christopher's, there's crucifixes. We found all sorts in this huge hallway when we stripped the paper back, because it was an olive green colour, but it was just paper that had been painted over. There's all little copper gargoyles all the way around. All of these, and it turns out what I didn't know when we first got the property, and I had a big oil drum, a big 45-gallon drum, burning things, because, other people's possessions. There were bags and bags of letters, bags of them, and they were all automatic writing. where they'd been. I don't even know the word for it. Where they've been having seances and perceived spiritual beings coming through, and the writing would be italic, and then it'd go off in a tangent, and you'd see something, another style of writing. So there was all this activity in the property as well, and it's still very active today. And
somebody basically opened up. It's like you most certainly are familiar with the skull experiment, right?
Well, it's funny you should say that, because Robin Foy, who was principal of the skull experiment, he sort of started it. Good friend of mine, Mick, spent time in Spain with him, when he moved to Spain. And then Mick and myself, we started, not our own skull experiment, but we started doing things of a similar nature. Mick has a huge house about 20 miles from me. It's over 5 floors with a great big basement, and we started doing the experiments in the basement, but we closed it down. It took up a little bit of a sinister turn, let's put it that way. I'll not go into any more detail because it's not fair on Mick, because he may listen to this, and it's his choice. It was his right, because it was his property, and there were about 5 of us doing it. And things came through, and believe it or not, they came through.
Has he done any interviews? Has he done any interviews?
No.
Would he be willing to do an interview?
Maybe I could speak to him. He'd probably tell you what were happening. But what they saw when we were doing with the red light coming through me, they didn't like, and that's the truth of it. And
wait, all right. So say that again. So. They didn't like, who's they? The
people involved. They felt it were dark and quite demonic. The things that were occurring whilst we were participating in this.
But you said the red light coming through you.
We would sit as part of it. We would do lots of different things, which Mick had done with Robin Foy. But we would sit as part of it. We would sit with a red light over us in the darkness, one subject. And you would look, I don't know the word for it. Is it transmediums? We would look at the face of the individual, and you could see changes. They perceived it as spirit, I suppose, and they would see changes, but they didn't see spirit with me. And that's the truth of it.
What did they see?
Well, they thought it looked demonic. They saw my eyes go white. I mean, there's 5 people there, and they were sort of aghast, going, his eyes are open. His eyes have gone white. Oh, my God, his eyes have gone white. Look at that. His face has changed. And everything was in silence until these things were happening. And it erupted as they were saying it. And I don't know. I'm not entirely comfortable even talking about that part of it, because that's the first time I've ever mentioned it. Because I know Mick just said we're going to have to stop this. It's not what we wanted to achieve from this, and they weren't. But I weren't looking for that. But that's what happened, and we all had a go at doing this, the red light, and just concentrating on the face and seeing what happened. And that's the only time, and it happened like on about 4 or 5 occasions whilst observing me.
Why red light?
Don't know. I don't know. That's the method that the mediums use. I'm not going to talk about this as an expert here, because I went into this the similarities to the skull experiment, but guided by Mick. Do you see?
Interesting. I mean, I think red light is the lowest frequency light in the visible spectrum.
Okay.
Why not violet light, which would be the highest?
I don't know.
Okay, so I'm just asking.
Yeah, well, I haven't.
I don't know if you could tell this, but this will sound arrogant, so please forgive the audience. The audience knows me. I don't say these things, but one thing that I am decent at is pattern recognition, and I think you probably noticed that in this interview, where you'll say something and I'll connect it to 6 other things that are relevant. Mm-hmm. So interesting. It'll be interesting to find. Is there a history behind why red light?
You're asking me questions, and I haven't got an answer for it.
Okay.
I was just guided. I was intrigued when it was suggested that these seances and these sittings were going to be started up again, and I was invited. So I was intrigued, and I thought, I'd like to be involved in this, because I knew that Mick was the genuine article, as in he had spent time with the man who initiated and started the skull experiments, as in Robin Foy. So that's the reason I sort of jumped on board and got involved in it. And I think we participated for about 2 months. And
for folks who have no idea what the skull experiments are, just really quick, can you just, like, three sentences?
The skull experiments, I don't know the exact years, but they were the man Robin Foy and a group of people conducted these experiments. I think they were trying to contact the spirit world, but they encountered other things, alien beings, even small UFOs and things allegedly materializing out of thin air. I didn't know the man. I only had dealings with Mick. So, my knowledge of this is limited. I didn't expect to be talking about this today.
And by the way, they also shut it down because it took a sinister turn.
Yeah. Well, that's the direction that was going. In Mick's opinion, he says, I don't want to be doing this. Even though we were in a basement, it's in his home. Do you know what I mean? And he didn't like what he was looking at, and there you go.
All right. Now, we got to this point because you were talking about the property where you were finding automatic writing, letters, things like that. It's strongly suggestive of some sort of a portal having been opened there. But let's go back to that. I didn't mean to take you off track, but
no, it's fine. It's fine. I probably gravitated towards that anyway. But as obviously the holes that appeared in my back, which you're going to have a photograph of, so it's not just Paul talking hot air. Even if I have to just show you the book. As soon as Mary said that, and I reached round, and you could put your finger end into one of them. They weren't little matchstick burns. These were holes, and I started to remember. I felt the pain in my back, the corkscrew turning as this implement, and they were telling me it's a spring, a bed spring turning in my back. Don't worry, this is a bed spring turning. I think I must have passed out with the pain. I really do. But I remembered that, so there's not a lot of memory after that. That's probably the last interaction, as in last visitation, that took place, 1997. And after that, obviously, I've always been on this path. I've always thought, well, I'm going to write about this eventually one day. And basically I did do, but then without research in 2002, I started with the website, started collecting other people's reports, visiting people. I've amassed not just hundreds, probably thousands of accounts, first-hand accounts. I'm not bothered about people who want to tell me that the dad's friend saw something when he left pub one night. I collect these accounts, got into the cryptid type phenomena quite by chance, writing the first book. Local paper put an advert in saying, author wants stories of the strange and unusual. And basically I started getting stories about something that I never thought I'd write about, the Flixton werewolf. And 12 miles from where I live, there's an old story of a werewolf account of the Flixton werewolf, and it goes back decades and decades. It goes back hundreds of years. It's probably one of the oldest werewolf type accounts, if it was recognized as that back then, that's out there. Flixton's a little village in North Yorkshire, and there's one of the most important archaeological sites in England called Starcar that sits on the edge of the village. Basically, it's a dried up lake bed that would have been called, well, it's now called Lake Flixton, but it goes back to Paleolithic times. We're looking at 8,000 to 12,000 years ago. And there's a lot of documented history about it, not to the werewolf phenomena, but archaeologists of the day theorized that these people were shamanic, and they were practicing shamanic ritual based on what they'd found and sacrifice. So I'm talking about shamanic rituals and the transformation, even if it's some kind of induced transformation and not the movement of limbs and body parts, because I don't think that's possible. I really don't. I don't care if you subscribe to it, but I don't think that's possible. Maybe it's some kind of drug-induced transformation that people are seeing. I don't know. But we've now we have the stories of what people call the Flixton werewolf, this strange bipedal creature that people have seen over decades. I've got reports that go back to the 1930s on the cars And you're thinking now, immediately I've said it, on the cars. What are the cars? That's the wetland. That's the former Lake Flixton. And cars, it's CARRS. Cars means reeds and elder wetlands. So it's on the Flixton cars. And the reports from the farmers, the people living local to the area, right back to the 30s, I've got reports of people claiming that there's something that fits the description of a werewolf. I'm not asking people to believe what I'm saying. I've spoke to lots of witnesses who claim to have seen this thing, and I mean lots, in present day. Some have seen it decades ago. Some have seen it, claim to have seen it within the last 18 months. I took a police officer in when we made Wolflands, because the locations where we've made Wolflands are literally 10 to 12 miles away from Flixton. And I took a police officer in, and his words were, look, for me, seeing is believing. And unless I saw something like this, I don't believe you. Well, I asked him if he would not grill these two witnesses. I said, but will you interview them in your style without them even knowing, perhaps? I told them that there's a police officer coming in with us, but they wouldn't have probably been aware that he was talking to them and getting information out. And when daylight arrived, because we didn't have much sleep that night, and we're in this deep forest in North Yorkshire, an old forest it was, nothing occurred. And I said, well, what do you think? He goes, well, like I told you before, seeing is believing. He says, and unless I see something like this, I can't believe it. He says, but I believe they're telling the truth, which was an interesting analogy that he put it across like that. But I know we're not here to talk about the moment about the Flixton werewolf. So which direction do you want to go now, Sean?
So going back to the property that you have, you said people are still seeing things.
Absolutely.
It's on a negative magnetic anomaly because there are fault lines there. What are your theories behind why all those things are significant?
Perhaps these areas, these locations, I know people like to use the term locations of high strangeness, perhaps these locations are drawing many types of unexplained phenomena to them. Do you know what I mean? But is it one? As I think I said to you before we started, is it one? Is it phenomenon? Is it one phenomena that's almost got a trickster element to it and posing as many, many different things? Or is it many different types of phenomena, all using a similar... I don't even know if exotic science is the word to use for it, because it just may be some natural phenomena that we don't understand that's able to access these areas. It's difficult to say, but it does strike me that a lot of these areas, I know you've got UFO groups, big UFO groups, who seem to disregard other types of evidence, even though it's presented at the side of a major UFO sighting. Somebody will say, oh, by the way, and this happened, or, oh, we had poltergeist activity. Well, let's just concentrate on the UFO. I'd rather do that. Well, yeah, I think they're missing a trick, because in a lot of instances, you've got a lot of different types of phenomena presenting within a UFO account, for instance. And I think people are missing a trick there, and at multi-phenomena, I think everything's occurring in and around these affected areas. It's almost like throwing a stone into a pool, and you've got the epicenter, and then you've got the ripples, you've got the sort of after effects, the dissipation, but you've got the other associated phenomena that's there as well. There's a case that I looked into in North Yorkshire, which I'm still looking into, and I've called the Hummenby incident. And in a little village in North Yorkshire, even the name's interesting, because it means Hundmanby, which in ancient text, it's farmstead of the Hound Man, which is an interesting set of words when you consider that it's 2 miles from Flixton, where they've got the stories of the Flixton werewolf. It's not some recent terminology or something that Paul Sinclair's made up, farmstead of the Hound Man. That goes back hundreds of years, which is interesting when you've got that connotation to this bipedal creature.
Well, I'll ask you one last question. Do you have a sense of what that was, or what you think that was that has been interacting with you most of your life?
I wish I could say it was alien related, but I don't know. These things, I've said before, these things could have been demons. Maybe demons are aliens, and we've just got it wrong. I really don't know. I wish I could say. And, as a child, you would see these things, and they were just terrifying. And whether they were alien, whether they were demon, I think we're just playing with words here. I really don't know, and I'm still no wiser all these years on.
All right, well, Paul, this was absolutely fascinating, and I'm sorry that I think I started picking at a scab you didn't even know you had. So my apologies for that.
It's okay.
But it was illuminating and fascinating, and I look forward to talking with you in the next episode.
Thank you very much.
If you enjoyed today's video, please hit like and subscribe, and also hit the notification button so you can be notified whenever I post new content. Thank you. Now, if you're enjoying the channel and you want to support it, there are several things you can do. In fact, there are 5 things you can do. The first thing you can do is just buy my books. I got plenty of books out in the market right now, and I would prefer that folks buy a book rather than giving me direct support, because they get something out of it. They get a real tangible product. The second way you can support me is by becoming a member on YouTube or becoming a patron on Patreon. And just go to either site and it'll explain everything. The third way you can support the channel is by checking out my merch site, which is here. There's plenty of stuff that you can get to support the channel. And I'd appreciate that you have it and can wear it. Not only do you help support the channel, but you also help promote the channel, and I appreciate that. The fourth way that you can support the channel, and this is really easy, is anytime you want to buy something on Amazon, literally just go to the description below and click on any link, literally any link. The channel gets a cut of that, and it costs you no extra money. You just go through the link, as I'm part of the Amazon Affiliates Club. The fifth and final way you can support the channel is through donations. Now, I don't prefer these because it's more of an expression of gratitude, but you don't really get anything out of it as a subscriber to the channel. However, if you decide to do these options, there's 2 options. There's Buy Me a Coffee, which is a separate site, and there's also, you can go through YouTube with either a super chat, super sticker, or a super thanks. Again, I prefer Buy Me a Coffee because that organization takes less money than Amazon does. But either way, I appreciate any support you are willing to give the channel. So thank you very much, and keep watching. I really appreciate it.